Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, October 2nd, 2025. Day 2 of the federal government shutdown, and zero chance it'll be settled today, with the Senate not conducting votes because of the Jewish holiday. Republicans and Democrats trading accusations over which party is at fault for the impasse, and the debate over health care continues, including Democrats wanting to extend Obamacare health insurance premium subsidies, Republicans accusing Democrats of wanting to provide health care to illegal immigrants. House Speaker Mike Johnson saying today, "I quite literally have nothing to negotiate." The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries saying Democrats are in this fight to win this fight. President Donald Trump posts that he is meeting with the OMB Director Russell Vought to see which, in the president's words, Democrat agencies might be cut. The president says the radical left Democrats have given him an unprecedented opportunity with the government shutdown. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz talks about how the federal shutdown is affecting the people of his state. And we'll hear from two members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, whose districts have a lot of federal workers facing furloughs and possible layoffs. Plus, Israel intercepts an international aid flotilla heading to Gaza. And we remember conservationist Jane Goodall, best known for her work with chimpanzees, who has died at the age of 91. We'll hear her from a 2020 appearance at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., from C-SPAN's video library on climate change. A story from the Hill. The U.S. Capitol was quiet on the second day of the government shutdown as votes are not scheduled in either chamber in observance of Yom Kippur. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, held a press conference with members of his leadership team outside his office at 10 a.m. Eastern in an otherwise largely empty House. Senate scheduled to meet at noon. A Senate GOP aide said no formal meetings are scheduled for the day, though some senators are talking to each other by phone during the holiday. The next Senate votes will take place Friday, when the upper chamber will vote again on a motion to advance the alternative Democratic continuing resolution to fund government until October 31st. The Senate will then vote on a procedural motion to advance the House-passed measure funding government until November 21st. Both motions need 60 votes to succeed, and both are expected to fail. That was from the Hill. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, opened the Senate.
Mr. President, we are into the second day of a government shutdown after Democrats once again rejected a clean, nonpartisan funding bill to keep the government open while we continue bipartisan appropriations work. We're not going to be voting today, as we have Jewish colleagues who are currently observing Yom Kippur. But we're going to be voting tomorrow. And we're going to give my Democrat colleagues another opportunity to reopen the government by passing the clean, nonpartisan funding extension before us. Mr. President, I realize that my Democrat colleagues are facing pressure from members of their far-left base, but they're playing a losing game here. A robust majority of American voters are against a government shutdown. Even some Democrat members are raising concerns, with a Democrat House member noting yesterday, and I quote, "This government shutdown is a result of hardball politics driven by the demands far-left groups are making for Democrat Party leaders to put on a show of their opposition to President Trump. The shutdown is hurting Americans and our economy. Normal policy disagreements are no reason to subject our constituents to the continued harm of this shutdown." End quote. That, Mr. President, from a Democrat House member. Organizations ranging from the National Fraternal Order of Police to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to the Teamsters have spoken out against shutting down the government. The Teamsters president said Tuesday, and I quote, "A shutdown will hurt working people, period. Senators should pass the House-passed clean, short-term funding bill," end quote. Senators should pass the House-passed clean, short-term funding bill, end quote. That, Mr. President, again, from the president of the Teamsters. Clean, Mr. President, is what he said. My Democrat colleagues have little to work with in this debate, with their own previous statements working against them. And so they've tried to portray the clean, nonpartisan funding bill before us as something other than what it is. But the Teamsters president reminds us of the facts. We are not asking Democrats to swallow a list of new Republican policies or partisan demands. Not in there. We are asking Democrats to do nothing more than pass a clean, nonpartisan bill to fund the government for a few more weeks so that we can get back to to bipartisan appropriations work.
The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, on the Senate floor. There were speeches today, but no votes in observance of the Yom Kippur Jewish holiday. The government shutdown has already been incorporated into political ads. Here are some from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee targeting Senator John Husted, Republican of Ohio, and one from the National Republican Campaign Committee that's run by the House Republicans, aimed at all Democrats.
It's the groceries, the car, the electric bill, everything down to the clothes you're wearing. It's all going up in cost. Your budget was already a balancing act. Now you need a magic trick. John Husted supported the tariffs that are jacking up prices. Tariffs you know you're paying. He voted to raise healthcare costs and cut Medicaid. Now he'd rather shut the government down than fix it. And that won't work for Ohio.
Democrats shut it down.
Democrats are pushing for the shutdown, and they will get blamed if it happens.
Democrats refuse to fund the government. So now military troops, police, and Border Patrol lose their paychecks. Because of Democrats, veterans, farmers, small businesses lose critical funding. Disaster relief cut off. Democrats are grinding America to a halt in order to give illegal immigrants free health care. Tell Democrats, stop the shutdown.
Some of the political ads from the Republican and Democratic campaign committees in Congress on this day 2 of the government shutdown. About that claim of Democrats wanting to fund health care for illegal immigrants, the Democrats have been asking for two things in a federal government extension: extending enhanced subsidies for Obamacare insurance premiums and restoring $1 trillion to Medicaid from the Republican tax cut and spending cut law signed this summer. A White House press release mentions a California loophole referring to California providing health care to undocumented immigrants under Medicaid funded by both the federal government and the states. And from a USA Today article, the Trump administration and many Republicans have taken the view this year that certain immigrants once considered illegal should no longer be. For example, Department of Homeland Security this year canceled humanitarian parole under the Biden-era Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans program. And DHS also revoked the temporary protected status of some Venezuelans, Haitians, and others, though the revocations are tied up in federal court. That was from USA Today. On that subject of health care and immigration, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a Democrat from New Hampshire, was on Fox News today.
So I think we can agree we all want to deal with waste and fraud. We all want to make sure that it's American citizens and legal Americans who are getting access to health care. The illegal immigrant is just a red herring that's designed to try and prevent people from talking about the real issue, which is how do we provide health insurance for people in this country?
You know, I say a little detail. You say a red herring, but the fact is, Senator, that
no, I'm agreeing with you. Listen, I'm agreeing with you. You're trying to make an issue where there isn't one.
No.
We agree.
Senator,
illegal immigrants should not be getting access to the Affordable Care Act marketplace.
100%, Senator. But what I'm saying is that members of your party are making this an issue. Well, I can't
speak for members of my party, and I don't think you're right. I think you're making it an issue. Vice President Vance is making it an issue, but I haven't heard anybody in my party saying that illegal immigrants should get access to the health insurance marketplace.
I'm so glad you said that. Actually, I have some tape of your Democratic Party members saying this on the debate stage, so they've all said it. Let's play the clip.
A lot of you have been talking tonight about these government health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants. Okay.
Senator, that's literally every member of your party, from moderate to more progressive, that have said that in the past. I've seen them all on the cable.
I beg to disagree with you. I have not said that in the past. In New Hampshire, we do not provide health insurance for illegal immigrants. We have never done that. And you're just wrong. So the question right now is, what are we going to do to ensure that we're not kicking 24 million Americans, raising their premiums for health insurance, doubling those, and kicking 4 million Americans off of their health insurance. And that's the urgent issue that we need to address. And people on both sides of the aisle are talking about how do we work together to address that. That's what I think we need to do.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire, on Fox News Channel this morning. A Fox News article begins bipartisan talks on reopening the government began to materialize less than a day into the shutdown, with Republicans and Democrats trying to find a middle ground on expiring Obamacare tax credits. In the middle of Senate Republicans' third attempt to pass the House GOP short-term funding extension, a group of nearly a dozen senators huddled on the floor in the first public display of negotiations so far. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, who was in the huddle, said there are glimmers of hope, and I think they're bipartisan. That was the Fox News article from the first day of the shutdown on Wednesday. Another senator in that mix, Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota, was interviewed Wednesday night on KSFY-TV, Sioux Falls.
Do you think this is short term? Is it a matter of days? Is it a matter of weeks? Do we hit a month? What do you think?
This will be up to our Democrat colleagues to make that decision. This shutdown, which Senator Schumer has called for, is one that not all of his colleagues agree with. We are hopeful that by this coming Friday, enough of them will be convinced that we are very serious about doing the appropriations bills. We're very serious about addressing the issues surrounding the ACA tax credits that they say that this is the issue that they're most concerned with, and a lot of us Republicans are as well. We think there's a path forward. We will know on Friday whether or not they're serious about it. We think a number of them are, and we're hopeful that we'll get past this shutdown. We do not know if that's the case or not. A lot of it's going to determine whether or not Senator Schumer feels that the shutdown has gone on long enough. That's what we're waiting to find out.
Senator Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota, Wednesday night on KSFY-TV in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And the Senate is back in session Friday, October 3rd at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. As always, the U.S. Senate is live gavel to gavel on C-SPAN 2 television and anywhere in the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. This is Washington Today. A story from Politico. Speaker Mike Johnson moved to shut down any attempts to negotiate a way out of the shutdown Thursday, as some senators look for off-ramps. Johnson said at a news conference outside his Capitol office that Democrats should stop pressing Republicans to come to any agreement to reopen the government, saying Senate Democrats instead need to pass the 7-week stopgap bill that had already cleared the House. Johnson said, I quite literally have nothing to negotiate, before again warning that the shutdown will inflict pain on Americans as it drags on. That was from Politico. Speaker Johnson was joined at the news conference by the others in the House Republican leadership chain, Majority Leader Steve Scalise, the Whip Tom Emmer, and the conference chair, Lisa McClain of Michigan.
This is really simple. There is a way to open the government today. Pass the clean Republican CR bill that we already passed. I mean, it's really, really simple. That's it. Just pass it, right? Goodness, Democrats have done this 13 times before, right? The same bill 13 times before. It's really, really simple. So what's the problem now? Ask yourself, what's the problem now? Democrats want to make their most radical followers happy. They're pandering to the radical Democratic arm of their party. And you know what? They want to spend your money to do that. They want to spend your money on government benefits to illegals. Your money. Where does that $1.5 trillion come from? It comes from your pockets. And you're going to give it to illegals. Nobody wants that, except the Democrats. They're going to spend your money on a climate crusade, and they're going to spend your money on radical media outlets. Gang, this is your money. It comes out of your pockets that you work very, very hard for. And more than $1 trillion they want to spend on their radical Democratic goodies. What's more, they want to make you pay for that, all while gutting historic investments in rural health care, which is really interesting, right? What's their talking point now? Oh, health care, right? Then ask them, why would you gut $50 billion if you care so much about health care from the rural health care? Right? Because they don't have any facts. All they have is talking points, right? And they can't remember what they're talking about. right? They're talking out of both sides of their mouth. They want to take $50 billion away from rural health care. Gee, I wonder why. And since they didn't get any of those things on a silver platter, they want to throw a fit, a tantrum, and they want to shut the government down.
The U.S. House Republican Conference Chair Lisa McClain of Michigan at a news conference in the U.S. Capitol building today with other members of the House Republican leadership led by Speaker Mike Johnson, who was asked about a post today from President Donald Trump that read, "I have a meeting today with Russ Vought, he of the Protect 2025 fame, to determine which of the many Democrat agencies, most of which are a political scam, he recommends to be cut, and whether or not those cuts will be temporary or permanent. I can't believe the radical left Democrats gave me this unprecedented opportunity. They are not stupid people, so maybe this is their way of wanting to quietly and quickly make America great again." Signed, President DJT. There were follow-up questions to Speaker Mike Johnson in the clip you're about to hear about a banner at the Department of Housing and Urban Development's official government website that reads, "The radical left in Congress shut down the government. HUD will use available resources to help Americans in need." And about President Trump continuing to post AI-generated videos of House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries wearing a sombrero and a large mustache with Mexican mariachi music in the background.
Today at the White House with Mr. Vought, the president posted on Truth Social this morning that the meeting is to determine which of the Democrat agencies they recommend to be cut. This is in addition to the money for New York, for the transit funding being cut, and in addition to blue states seeing their energy funding cut. Two questions on this. I mean, do you think this is political targeting? Is that appropriate? And then in addition, HUD had on its agency webpage blaming radical Democrats for this. Is that an appropriate use of taxpayer money being overtly political? It's something we haven't seen before.
I think what the HUD website says is the objective truth that we're telling you right now. There are 44 Democrats in the Senate. And by the way, every Democrat in the House except one who voted to shut the government down, they are the ones that made that decision. The White House and the executive branch take no pleasure in this. But when they are tasked with determining what the priorities are, obviously, they're going to follow their principles and priorities and not the other team. That's the results of an election that everybody voted in, the popular election in Electoral College. I am. And that's why I'm pleading with the entire country to call your senators, your Democrat senators, the 44 people who want to shut the government down. You should call them right now and tell them to get here and get to work and open the country up for the people. So many of you asked me this morning about sombreros and memes and why Hakeem Jeffries is all alarmed by that. But look, these are games. These are sideshows. People are getting caught up in battles over social media memes. We've got to keep this is not a game. We've got to keep the government open for the people. I don't know why this is so complicated. And to my friend Hakeem, who I was asked about, man, just ignore it. I mean, Gavin Newsom was trolling me last night. He painted me like a minion. He painted me yellow with big glasses and overalls. And I thought it was hilarious. You don't respond to it. For all my friends, R's and D's, don't respond to it. Get to work, do the people's business, and let's get on with it.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference Thursday morning on Capitol Hill. Later in the afternoon, the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, held his own news conference outside on the steps of the Capitol. He called for the White House and Republicans to sit down and negotiate reopening the government and including those health care provisions the Democrats have asked for.
You said yesterday this was not about 2026. Are you concerned in any way about the political ramifications that voters might blame your side down the road?
The American people are crystal clear on who shut down the government. Crystal clear. They know it was Donald Trump and Republicans for a wide variety of reasons. Republicans have repeatedly shut the government down throughout the years. And does any reasonable person think that Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or Mike Johnson or Senate Republicans are behaving like individuals who actually want to reopen the government? I mean, House Republicans literally are on vacation right now, scattered throughout the country and the world. Democrats have been here all week. We want to have a bipartisan discussion, use common sense to reopen the government, pass a spending agreement that makes life better for the American people, particularly as it relates to their high cost of living. Understand something, Chad. Donald Trump and Republicans spent all of last year promising that they were going to lower the high cost of living. They also spent all of last year running away from Project 2025, acting like Project 2025 didn't exist. But what have they been doing this year? This year, they've done nothing. Zip, zero. Stingy with De Niro. Nothing to lower the high cost of living for everyday Americans, while at the same period of time implementing and unleashing Project 2025. Now all of a sudden, Donald Trump admits it was his project all along. He just did it earlier today. What we're saying is America's too expensive. Donald Trump has made things worse. Costs haven't gone down on day one, they're going up. The cost of living is going up. Inflation is going up. The Trump tariffs are actually making life more expensive, thousands of dollars more per year for average, everyday Americans because of the Trump tariffs. And now Republicans refuse to do anything to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And as a result of that, tens of millions of Americans are going to have their premiums skyrocket out of control, double, triple, or quadruple. People are going to face medical bankruptcy. Millions of American citizens. And Republicans don't want to do anything about it. Democrats are in this fight until we win this fight.
U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, speaking to reporters outside the U.S. Capitol building. The House is not in session this week. The Senate was in session today, but took no votes because of the Jewish holiday. The Senate is back on Friday to resume votes on whether to reopen the government and under what conditions. New York Times writing about the history of federal government shutdowns, saying that shutdowns have their roots in 1974 when the U.S. government's budget process was reorganized to transfer much of the approval power to Congress. Before that, the executive branch retained broad powers to fund the government and in some cases could approve continued funding without congressional approval. The effects of the early shutdowns tended to be limited to certain agencies. Attorney General Benjamin R. Civiletti issued two legal opinions in 1980 and 81 that made shutdowns more severe and wide-reaching. Until that point, most government agencies could continue to operate even if funding bills had not been passed, with the understanding that money would eventually be approved. But Mr. Civiletti argued that it was illegal for the government to spend money without congressional appropriations, save for a few exceptions, including for work by federal employees that protected life and property. That was from the New York Times, which also notes there have been 22 federal government shutdowns of varying lengths in U.S. history. President Donald Trump had no official events on his schedule today. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke to reporters outside the White House about the shutdown.
We're on day two, unfortunately, of a government shutdown. The president, the vice president, the entire team here will continue to work and talk to members on the Hill to try and come to a resolution, to try to encourage Democrats to muster up the courage to do the right thing. And we believe there will be a vote taking place tomorrow, and we hope that vote will lead to the government reopening. That's what the president wants to see, and that's what we're working on today. John.
Yesterday, the vice president in the briefing room by your side expressed this optimism that he thinks this shutdown is going to be a short shutdown. Do you share that optimism? Does the president share that optimism?
I do. I think that's our hope, and that's our expectation. We know, Democrats know, they are doing the wrong thing by shutting the government down. You can see it when they're answering questions. You can hear it in their voice. There is zero good reason for them to vote to shut the government down right now. They are doing it for political reasons. They are doing it because they want to give taxpayer-funded health care benefits to illegal aliens, which is something the American people resoundingly rejected ahead of the election last year. That's why they reelected President Trump in a large part. And so Democrats know what the right thing to do is, and it's to reopen the federal government. Gabe.
Caroline, should ERs check immigration status before treating indictment?
I'm sorry?
Should ERs check for immigration status before treating indictment?
That's probably not a question for me to answer. I think that's a question for healthcare professionals and legal experts to answer.
I understand why I'm asking you, because Republicans have been saying that Democrats want to give benefits to undocumented immigrants, even though it's against the law for them to get these benefits?
Let me ask you, do you think that illegal aliens should receive Medicaid benefits? Medicaid benefits that go to the most vulnerable people in our country. That Medicaid benefits that were designed to help low-income families and Americans in our country. And what the Biden administration did, Gabe, is they allowed tens of millions of illegal aliens from all over the world to come into our country, yes, and they paroled them into the system. And you cover immigration, and you know well, it was a complete abuse of our immigration system. And they slapped a Band-Aid on these illegals. They called it temporary protective status. And then they allowed those illegals from all over the world to get free benefits. And you know who would like free benefits? Hardworking Americans who work their butts off every day, who are living paycheck to paycheck because of the Biden-induced inflation crisis. And there were higher wait times at hospitals under the Biden administration. We saw these illegals committing crimes all over our country, and they're getting things for free. That is fundamentally unfair, and this administration is not going to support it.
Should ERs, if a person comes in with a stroke or a bullet wound or is bleeding out, should they ask for immigration status before treating that person?
Gabe, I don't speak for emergency rooms across the country. I speak for the President of the United States, and that's what he believes on this policy.
The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt speaking to reporters outside the White House. Straight from CNBC, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Thursday that U.S. economic growth could be hurt by the government shutdown. He said during a CNBC Squawk Box interview, this isn't the way to have a discussion, shutting down the government and lowering the GDP. We could see a hit to the GDP, a hit to growth, and a hit to working America. Here is part of that interview.
Would the president, would Russ Vought, would they like to do some, I mean, they've already pulled back on some, on some funding in some blue states for, climate initiatives. So they're going ahead with some of these things. Do you think they'd like to finally shrink the size of the federal government and use this as the opportunity? Or are they hoping that we get things settled within the next couple of days, then that they don't have to do that?
Well, what they want is what's good for the American people and what's good for the country is a clean CR. The Democrats want to negotiate in the, like terrorists. They want to say, this is what we have to have, and if we don't get it, we're going to close down the government. So what President Trump, Vice President Vance, and the Republican leadership want is for the Democratic side to show a little leadership. And I don't think it's unreasonable for the president to use all the levers. Because, Joe, what they are asking for, they're asking for $1.5 trillion increase in spending. And let's just go back. That would be almost as big as the ill-fated IRA, which caused the worst inflation in half a century. So they want to put this inflationary impulse into President Trump's already strong economy. The economy is growing at 3.8%. We don't need $1.5 trillion pumped in. The Democrats seem to love inflation.
But getting back to Joe's kind of premise on this, are these furloughs or job layoffs in the federal government, are those going to come anyway? Because that's what the Democrats have suggested, that the Trump administration is going to push forward with layoffs and with furloughs anyway, whether they do this or not. Is that true?
Again, it's a talking point. Senator Schumer, Representative Jeffries, they're weak, they're discombobulated, they don't represent the American people, and they're making up excuses. So we'll see. I think that this is an opportunity, and they're using this opportunity. President Trump, in the first 9 months now, has been unstoppable. They've tried to stop him in the courts. They've tried to stop him in the press. And now they're trying to stop him with this shutdown.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today on CNBC. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 78, S&P up 4, NASDAQ up 88. And the headline at CNBC, stocks close at a record high as investors shake off shutdown concerns. Washington today continues in a moment.
I'm Dasha Burns, host of Ceasefire, Bridging the Divide in American Politics.
Ceasefire premieres October 10th.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Minnesota Star-Tribune, the federal government shutdown hasn't yet disrupted important services such as food assistance in Minnesota, but it could if it extends several weeks, state officials said Thursday. State leaders are beginning to assess the impact of the first federal shutdown since 2019 as President Donald Trump and Congress remain at an impasse over funding to keep the government up and running. The shutdown is putting thousands of federal workers at risk of furloughs and layoffs. That was from the Minnesota Star-Tribune. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, held a news conference today on this in the capital, St. Paul.
It's difficult on budgeting. It's especially difficult when you have divided government, but they have one-party rule. But you still need to make sure you have to compromise. You're not going to get everything you want. We had to make some really hard decisions on both sides here in Minnesota, but we got a fiscally responsible budget that put us as one of the most fiscally well-managed states with 12 states. That was done collectively together by coming together and compromising. And I see today again the misinformation. Well, it's not misinformation. It was a lie that the Speaker of the House is saying this is because of health care for illegal immigrants. They have one playbook, and it's to try and blame rather than govern. The fact of the matter is Democrats are asking not to cut Medicaid, not to cut these services, especially to rural hospitals, and not to give tax cuts to millionaires at a time when we have to have our budget. We saw that job numbers did not only not grow last month, they shrunk for the first time in over 3 years. So we're in a precarious situation. Our allies across the world, especially in Europe, are deeply concerned about how we're dealing with this. We're seeing the Vice President of the United States sending out memes that are racist against the leadership in the House and Senate at a time when we should be trying to find solutions. So we need to get them back to the table. We need to understand that the state of Minnesota cannot make up the difference on this, nor should the state of Minnesota have to. We pay more in than we get back. These are Minnesota tax dollars that are now not going anywhere. And I'll tell you, some of the early hits will be in the Farm Service offices, the FSA offices, which are already under threat because this is the time that they get used the most during harvest. We're seeing, of course, crisis in farm country because we're not having soybean purchases made. And I'm reminding people that these purchases that China is making elsewhere outside the United States are 10-year contracts, and it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get back into the market. So this is not a time for the federal government to be trying to distract from whatever things need to be done. Donald Trump has many times before he was president said if there's ever a government shutdown, there's one person to blame. It's the president. He was wrong about that. It's also the Speaker of the House. It's also those members of Congress from Minnesota who continue to not get their work done. And I would just say for good measure, I served in the House when shutdowns happen. It is outrageous for me to think that we're sending out memes, we're laughing at people. We have people being furloughed. We have programs being cut, and these people are still receiving a paycheck. So I would encourage the Minnesotans to make sure they turn that back. That's what I always did as a member of Congress, even though I had voted to keep the government open. But I want to spend a little time and have Anna Mingy talk to you about where we're at right now, what we know right now, and what will happen over the next several weeks if this continues.
Governor Tim Walz, Democrat from Minnesota, opening up a news conference today in St. Paul, Minnesota. USA Today publishing a list of which states, plus Washington, D.C., have the highest number of federal employees. D.C. is tops, 162,000. And among the states, California at 151,000, followed by Virginia at 147,000, Maryland at 145,000, and Texas at 130,000. The state with the lowest number of federal employees, Vermont, about 3,000. Some congressional districts also have above average number of federal installations and employees. Florida's 1st district is one of them. And Congressman Jimmy Patronis, a Republican, posted this video Wednesday night.
My community in Northwest Florida will be so hurt because Chuck Schumer wants to cater to these radicals. At Eglin Air Force Base, at Herbert Field, at Duke Field, tens of thousands of men and women are being directly affected. More than 5,800 civilian employees, over 5,000 contractors support these critical bases, many of which will face furloughs. Some will be forced to work without pay, while Democrats are advocating for for health care for illegal immigrants. Statewide, 95,000 federal employees call Florida home or at risk, including 37,000 that work for the VA, 33,000 at the Department of War. In our district alone, more than 24,000 employees are facing uncertainty whether you work for TSA or at one of our airports. The Coast Guard continues to defend our shores with no paycheck. The Blue Angels are not participating at Flea Week, and they're sidelined. Democrats are asking for America's law enforcement and essential military personnel to put their lives on the line without pay. Despite these impacts, my office will continue to remain open through the shutdown, and we will continue fielding constituent issues. This shutdown, however, will affect some backlogs and casework of certain executive branch agencies due to furloughs. If you're being affected by the Schumer shutdown, I encourage you to call Chuck Schumer directly. His office number is 202-224-6542. Again, if you're being affected by Senator Schumer's shutdown, I encourage you to call his office, 202-224-6542. God bless, and I will continue to give you updates as they come around. Thank you so much.
Congressman Jimmy Patronis, Republican of Florida, in a video Wednesday night. Also Wednesday, Congressman James Walkinshaw, Democrat of Virginia, whose district in Northern Virginia, bordering Washington, D.C., also has a lot of federal employees, was interviewed on WUSA-TV, the CBS affiliate in Washington.
We know that there are a lot of federal workers in your district, a lot of federal workers in Northern Virginia. For the last 9 months, we have seen some of those layoffs of government workers. President Trump, again, threatening layoffs of federal workers even during this shutdown. What is your response to that?
Well, it is very important to note that the threat from the Trump administration to conduct mass layoffs during a shutdown is a threat to violate the law. Federal law is very clear. During a shutdown, the administration can only do things that are necessary to preserve life and property or to fulfill a constitutional duty. And all of the administrative and legal work necessary to do a reduction in force or mass firings or layoffs does not meet those categories. So if they try to do that, they will be violating the law. They'll end up in court, and I think they will lose.
We know that federal agencies are operating under a lot of contingency plans. Many services will either slow down or stop altogether. When it comes to day-to-day lives, right, these are people's paychecks that we're talking about as well. How are you advising your constituents right now to prepare for any delays in pay, cancellations, among other services?
So my office will be releasing a resource guide today to my constituents, answering some of the most commonly asked questions about a shutdown. Historically, local credit unions in the region have offered low-interest loans to federal workers. Their agencies have worked to support them. So I'm going to be working to get those folks as much information and access to resources as possible. I'll also note that even though the Constitution requires that members of Congress get paid even during a shutdown, I'll be voluntarily having my salary withheld for the length of the shutdown. I feel like, I should be in the same situation as the thousands of folks I represent who work for federal agencies and won't be getting paid. Congressman
James Walkinshaw, Democrat from Virginia, the 11th Congressional District in Virginia, in Northern Virginia, interviewed Wednesday by WUSA-TV, CBS affiliate in Washington. Today is the second day of the federal government shutdown. The Senate had no votes today. The House has been out all week. The Senate is back Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We'll have live coverage on C-SPAN 2 television anywhere in the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. And C-SPAN will continue bringing you the latest on the government shutdown on C-SPAN Radio, TV, cspan.org, and on our free app. This is Washington Today. California's Attorney General Rob Bonta and the Secretary of State in California, Shirley Weber, both Democrats, held a news conference today in Los Angeles, encouraging early voting and vote by mail on Proposition 50, which an LA Times article describes as a ballot measure championed by Governor Gavin Newsom and other state Democrats to try to boost the number of Democrats in Congress. Proposal was in response to Texas and other GOP-led states trying to increase the number of Republicans in the House at the behest of President Trump to enable him to continue to enact his agenda during his final 2 years in office. Again, that was from the L.A. Times. A reporter today asked the Attorney General Bonta about the high-profile nature of this ballot measure and the potential threat of voter intimidation.
This proposition almost has more national implications than it does state implications. You talked about intimidation, maybe misinformation. Have you seen anything early on that would indicate there are kind of outside forces or anyone else trying to disenfranchise voters to this point?
Not for this. I mean, we've seen it happen in other places. I think the best example is what I mentioned in my original comments with, President Biden, his own voice on an AI-generated robocall in New Hampshire to try to disenfranchise voters and tell them erroneous information. If that can happen there, then we would be naive if we didn't prepare for the possibility here and make people aware of it and make sure people are cross-checking information and going to trusted sites, government official sites where they can confirm the date of the election and their polling place and all types of other information. We're definitely seeing misinformation and disinformation generally, but in terms of anything as significant as a President Biden AI-generated robocall, we haven't seen that yet, but we wouldn't expect that yet. We would expect it in what I call the voting window, once ballots are mailed and before the last day for them to be cast. That's when we might expect some inappropriate or an unlawful activity. So we'll be wary.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta standing beside the state's Secretary of State Shirley Weber at a news conference today in Los Angeles ahead of the November special election on Prop 50. This is Washington today. From Al Monitor, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised Israeli naval forces Thursday for intercepting a Gaza-bound aid flotilla as authorities prepared to deport pro-Palestinian activists aboard the vessels. The global Samud flotilla of around 45 vessels began its voyage last month with politicians and activists, including Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg, heading to Gaza, where the United Nations says famine has set in. Netanyahu said in a statement, "I commend the soldiers and commanders of the Navy who carried out their mission on Yom Kippur in the most professional and efficient manner. Their important action prevented dozens of vessels from entering the war zone and repelled a campaign of delegitimization against Israel." Reporting from Al Monitor. At the United Nations in New York City, the deputy spokesperson to the Secretary General, Farhan Haq, was asked about it.
On the latest situation of the flotilla, Israel government now intercepts the vessels and escort them to Ashdod port. Do you consider this action again a violation of international law, given the fact it's being intercepted in the international waters?
Certainly, we believe that the laws applying to international waters must be respected. That's as much as I would have to say on that.
So what's the reaction from the Secretary General on those people who got detained?
We certainly hope that, again, our priority is avoiding any harm to come to those on board the vessels, and we hope that they will be treated fairly and with respect for their rights and their dignity. Ibtisam.
Follow up on that. Given the humanitarian nature of the flotilla, they were there to provide aid and break the siege. Do you believe that the Israelis should have let them reach the Gaza coast and upload their humanitarian aid?
We want all efforts to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza to be supported. Obviously, we're aware of the security concerns that they had raised, but we want to make sure that all civilians are treated fairly and are not harmed.
Farhan Haq is the deputy spokesperson to the United Nations Secretary General, holding a news conference today in New York City at the UN. The Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, also posting today on X, "I strongly condemn the deadly terrorist attack on a synagogue in Manchester, United Kingdom, on the holy day of Yom Kippur. Targeting a sacred place of worship where people go to find peace is particularly heinous." Jane Goodall, a conservationist known for her groundbreaking work in the chimpanzee research field, where she documented the primates' distinct personalities and use of tools, and the founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and Roots and Shoots, has passed away. She was 91 years old. A U.S. News and World Report article says that the Jane Goodall Institute announced her death yesterday in an Instagram post where they explained she died of natural causes in California while on a speaking tour. That article says her discoveries revolutionized science, and she was a tireless advocate for the protection and restoration of our natural world. That advocacy comes from her love of animals. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz paid tribute to Jane Goodall at the start of his news conference today in St. Paul that was primarily on the federal government shutdown.
I got the opportunity to wear my Goodall Institute pin today. We lost a great humanitarian yesterday in Jane Goodall, and I had, strangely enough, in both my life before this and in politics, I was pretty actively engaged with the geospatial conference of ESRI does, and there have been several occasions where I was there to speak, and so was Jane Goodall and the Institute people. So that work is something that I have been watching, and I think the world knows what she did. So honoring Jane Goodall.
Governor Tim Walz, Democrat of Minnesota, opening up a news conference in St. Paul. C-SPAN broadcast a conversation with Jane Goodall in 2020 from the National Press Club in Washington. Here's a part of that. Then Press Club President Michael Friedman asking her about climate change.
Climate change and environmental destruction indeed seem like challenges and problems that can be solved through government initiatives. And we're not seeing that happening, as you mentioned. Who needs to be in this fight? Who else besides the government need to be in this fight?
Well, very important are the big corporations, the big businesses, but also every single person. We can all be involved. And I think the reason that I meet so many people, I used to travel around the world 300 days a year until lockdown. And I met so many people, particularly young people, who'd lost hope and given up, and they felt helpless and hopeless. And so, the most important message is that each one of us, we may only make a tiny difference, a tiny impact with the choices we make of what to buy. How did it harm the environment? Did it cause animals suffering? Is it cheap because of child slave labor or unequitable wages for people in other countries? And if we all make ethical choices, then we're going to be able to contribute to mitigating climate change.
Jane Goodall at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2020 from C-SPAN's video library. She has passed away at the age of 91. More from the U.S. News and World Report article on her death. In later years, she pushed back on gloom and doom messaging and aggressive tactics by climate activists, saying they could backfire. Her advice: focus on the present and make choices today whose impact will build over time. And former President Joe Biden, who awarded Jane Goodall the Presidential Medal of Freedom just before he left office last January, posting on X, "Jill and I deeply saddened to learn of the passing of Jane Goodall, whose activism, vision, and message of hope mobilized a global movement to protect the planet." Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word. We'll send you the stories making headlines in Washington. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.